So, with 2024 starting to come to a close, I think we can all agree that most of the big video game announcements for this year, they've already happened. Now, yes, you do have the Keighley Awards coming up, and there could be some interesting things there. I kind of foresee it as mostly updates this year, but that's more of something that maybe Sony or Microsoft would do. I think we've all learned that Nintendo they just don't care about this show anymore. You're lucky if Doug Bowser shows up to accept the Family Game Award, which they might as well rename the Nintendo Award each and every year. So I think as far as Nintendo is concerned, we've seen what there is to be seen in 2024. So I thought in today's video, it would be fun to kind of go back and look at Nintendo's 2024 as a whole, talking about the games they released, the games they announced for 2025, the expansion of services, and kind of what the future holds for Nintendo after 2024. Was 2024 a great year for the company, or was it a bit of a disappointment? I guess it kind of depends on who you ask. So we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of all this. If this is your first time on the channel, hit that subscribe button, pal. But we're going to start things off with, obviously, software, because software is very, very important. And surprisingly, on paper, Nintendo actually had a very strong software output, especially if you look at how games were kind of staggered out for release, especially compared to something like Sony and Microsoft, whereas those systems, the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series, they're finally supposed to be hitting their stride. This is a system, the Nintendo Switch, that is on the way out, and yet Nintendo really had some solid output in terms of the raw number of games that we got. The games are as follows. We got Another Code Recollection, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, Princess Peach Showtime, Endless Ocean Luminous, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, Nintendo World Championships NES Edition, Emio The Smiling Man, Famicom Detective Club, The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, Super Mario Party Country Bear Jamboree, sorry, no Country Bear, and Mario and Luigi Brothership. So on paper, that is quite a large amount of games. And I think from a raw output perspective, it was very solid, you know, and there was kind of something, you know, a good variety of different titles as well. But obviously one of the things you kind of got to hone in on here is the fact that there were quite a bit of remasters or potentially remakes in here as well. And I feel like some of them weren't quite as good as others, like Another Home Recollection. Now, that was consisting of Trace Memory 1 and 2, which was called Another Code in other regions. But those were Nintendo DS games. I played the demo for that, and I was definitely a bit disappointed. And I think I know why. It's because on the Nintendo DS, those games really utilized the system very well in a unique manner. Nintendo DS games weren't known for just like raw horsepower. It was more so about how are you going to use the system's unique features at that time to sort of make for a different sort of play experience. So it didn't really translate to console very well for me. One of the games being a DS game, one of the games being a Wii game. Mario vs. Donkey Kong, Luigi's Mansion 2, Paper Mario, The Thousand Year Door. These were all games that previously existed onto other platforms, but were brought over to the Nintendo Switch. Me personally, I didn't have any sort of desire to play through any of these again. If I see Luigi's Mansion 2 HD for a cheap price, I probably will pick it up because I did enjoy that game on the Nintendo 3DS, but I played that game on the Nintendo 3DS. So when you kind of get rid of all the remakes and remasters and look at the new titles that were released, I think some were good and some of them were probably a little bit of a disappointment. You know, my highlights out of all the games that released this year were Nintendo World Championships NES Edition and The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. Now, I definitely didn't love either of those games. Nintendo World Championships NES Edition was fun for like a month, and then I didn't really play it much after that. But I did get a lot of gameplay out of that game. I picked up the collector's edition of it as well, so I did have fun with that game. Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, same sort of thing. You know, there were definitely some very good aspects of it, but then there were some aspects of the game that I just did not like, and I was not able to look past, mainly the inventory management system and how cumbersome it was. I feel like that could have been so much more streamlined. When you look at stuff like Super Mario Party Jamboree, you know, Endless Ocean Luminous, Princess Peach's Showtime, like, you know, the Mario Party games are fun, especially if you have nostalgia for Mario Party. I was never a big Mario Party fan growing up, so a lot of those games just kind of miss out on me. Endless Ocean was just boring. Princess Peach's Showtime, like, I don't know, not my cup of tea, you know, more of an OJ sort of game. And then Mario and Luigi Brothership, it just didn't look good to me. You know, it still doesn't look good to me. I've watched people play it to see if maybe it'll sort of change my mind, but I just don't feel like this game made a proper jump to the Nintendo Switch from previous handheld systems. So overall, I think there was good variety. I just feel like if there would have been like one heavy hitter game, you know, one sort of cornerstone game for this year, that this year would probably be remembered as, you know, one of the better years of the system's life cycle because of stuff like that variety. But with the lack of like a big sort of marquee title, I feel like, you know, for me, a lot of these games were games I'd either already played or games that I honestly just was not interested in. So for me, a little bit of a disappointment, but that's kind of to be expected. And I do think that there are people out there, probably people watching this video, that thoroughly enjoyed this year. And I wouldn't even say like that's incorrect. It's just kind of down to your personal preference about what types of games you enjoy and what types of games you gravitate towards. There are people that love every single game that Nintendo ever puts out. And while I like a lot of them, there are games that don't necessarily resonate with me in exactly the same way. But when talking about software for 2024 that released, you also have to talk about software that was announced in 2024 for 2025. And I actually think that 2025 looks more promising than it probably should. Now, of course, you have Donkey Kong Country Returns HD. I'm sorry, I'm never going to say anything nice about that game. It's a scam for $60, should be $40, maybe $50 at most, but not a full price release here, unless you are adding in substantial amounts of content, and it seems like they are not doing that. But two other titles that were announced actually have me pretty hyped. A game that I want to revisit again on stronger hardware, and a game that we've all been waiting for 7+ years. I, of course, am talking about Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition and Metroid Prime 4. We got looks at both of these games, Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition and Metroid Prime 4, and I think both of these games look fantastic. Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition will be releasing in March, and Metroid Prime 4 still does not have a release date, but I would assume that would potentially be a early summer game if we're already, you know, showing it off during Nintendo Directs and stuff like that. And I do think that it will release on the Nintendo Switch, but it might also release on something else. But there's already two games that I'm super looking forward to playing in 2025 for the standard Nintendo Switch, and considering how old this system is, like that's pretty impressive. And there are going to be people that are hyped for Donkey Kong as well. Like I get it. People like Donkey Kong, and I like Donkey Kong. You know what? I want Donkey Kong to have a new game. That's how much I like Donkey Kong. I want to see this monkey, this ape, this primate. I want to see him flourish. I want to see him more. I want to see him starring in new experiences rather than just the same old. But, you know, it is what it is. I think 2025 looks pretty strong, especially in those first 2 months, or 3 months, I should say, because people are going to be excited for Donkey Kong, even though I'll preach to them not to be. But a lot of people are going to be excited for Xenoblade Chronicles X because, well, they probably didn't play that game since it was a Wii U game, and that kind of limits the amount of games that were released only on the Wii U, and I think we might be seeing the end of those games coming over. Now, of course, we've talked about games that released in 2024 and games that were announced in 2024 for 2025. But we also have to talk about other things involving Nintendo, but we're going to keep it mostly to the video game side of things. I'm not really interested in talking about theme parks and Nintendo Direct events for theme parks because I don't really care. And you know, if that's a bad thing to say, well, so be it. But there were some interesting things that did happen within Nintendo that do sort of relate to the video game side of things. Of course, we have to talk about Nintendo Switch Online. And this was something that I was hopeful was going to take a bit of a jump in 2024, but they really played it safe outside of one main thing. Now, there were new games added to Nintendo Switch Online, and some of them were obviously more exciting than others, but I do think, you know, for the most part, it was okay. It was okay. I'm not going to say it was great, but there were some highlights for me. You know, having more rare games on there, Killer Instinct for the Super Nintendo, Snake Rattle and Roll, Blast Cores back in February. That was really, really cool. Super Mario Land finally coming. That was very cool as well. You got a nice boost during June with games like Link to the Past and Four Swords, Metroid Zero Mission, Turok the Dinosaur Hunter, and Perfect Dark on the Nintendo 64, which I think was the strongest month for Nintendo Switch Online. Adding in that mature 17+ library of games with Perfect Dark and Turok the Dinosaur Hunter, very cool stuff. I like that. That was something that we had talked about previously because something like that had popped up in Japan. So, you know, that was really nice to see. But I feel like overall, especially after like the summer, the output for Nintendo Switch Online was just minimal at best. Like, you only got one output of Sega Genesis titles, and that literally just happened this past week on the 27th with 3 Genesis games coming to the service. Now, if you're an expansion Pack Plus member, like, you would expect a little bit more than that, wouldn't you? I feel like the N64 is almost becoming a bit tapped out as well. Like, yeah, there's a couple games, your Donkey Kong 64, which I don't really like, Diddy Kong Racing, which I absolutely love, but for the most part, your heavy hitter titles are already well represented on the Nintendo 64 library. I think some people, myself included, were hoping that a new console would be announced, or at least a new handheld would be announced. You have the Nintendo DS stuff that you could do. You've done DS emulation before on the Nintendo Wii U, so what's kind of the holdup with that? I think that would have been a very nice addition because a lot of those Nintendo DS games are stuck on the Nintendo DS because of the unique control scheme. But you have a touchscreen on your Nintendo Switch screen. You could come up with ways to circumvent it like emulators have done before. So I'm hopeful that 2025 will be a bit stronger for Nintendo Switch Online. Now, you did have the addition of Nintendo Music, which, you know, okay. Like, people got mad at me for not falling in love with Nintendo Music because I don't know why. When I'm driving, when I'm doing stuff and I'm listening to music, I'm listening to some Hood Rat stuff. I'm listening to some Madonna, Whitney Houston. I'm listening to some deathcore and death metal. Like, I don't want to hear like an Earthbound song or something, or, you know, something like it just doesn't hit with me, you know. And I have YouTube Music with YouTube Premium, so I can listen to all this stuff. It already exists for me, so I guess the app itself is kind of nice to have, and it does give a little bit of additional value. But I would have hoped for something a bit more, especially considering that we do know that all of the stuff from Nintendo Switch Online will indeed transfer over to the new system. And speaking of the new system, I think that was kind of one of the biggest letdowns in 2024, because I feel like going into the start of 2024, 90% of people expected to at least see what the next evolution of the Nintendo brand was when it came to the hardware side of things. They expected to see a Nintendo Switch 2 revealed, not to come out because it doesn't need to come out this year, but at least get a glimpse of the system, at least get some stuff to be excited about with it. And it doesn't seem like we are going to get that. Now, there are some hopeful people that it will be at the Game Awards. I mean, you could maybe find a snowball in hell too, but that doesn't mean that it's going to happen. Like, I think the probability for that is definitely extremely bottom of the basement low, like, because there's no need. Nintendo obviously does things on their own time during their own events, and I just feel like, you know, it would have been nice to have seen it. Like I said, you do something in September or October, a little reveal of it. Oh, it might hurt the holiday sales. But that's why they said the system is backwards compatible. Because if you're buying software now, like, it doesn't matter. Then you do a drastic price drop for the baseline Switch models and stuff like that. You still get sales for those. Like, I'm sure it doesn't cost, you know, the same to manufacture it as it did back in 2017. I'm sure those prices of those things have come down a bit. You've stockpiled parts of it for it as well. But yeah, I think that was kind of a bit of a disappointment for a lot of people, because I think, generally speaking, even though there were some really good games this year and there was a lot of stuff that came out, I feel like right now, hype for Nintendo isn't as high as it normally has been. I feel like a lot of people are indeed happy with the Switch, but they're also ready for the next generation. They're ready for the advancement. They're ready for whatever is indeed coming next. And I feel like that kind of has a little bit of a linger effect with the whole year of 2024. You know, was it a disappointment? Was it a great year? I'm sure you wonder what I think about it. For me personally, it was, I don't necessarily think it was either, but I lean more towards disappointment than it being like great, you know, because a lot of those games, they just didn't really hit with me. You know, the kind of sprinkling of Switch Online games just randomly, it was kind of like, okay. I did like some of the announcements, you know, confirming that Switch 2 was backwards compatible, confirming Metroid Prime 4 for 2025, Xenoblade Chronicles X for 2025 as well. Those are definitely high points of the year for me, and I did enjoy some of the software as well. But overall, it was pretty much a transition year, except that we hadn't seen what we are transitioning to as far as the next console is. And that kind of left a bit of a weird feeling for the year for me. But maybe you thought this year was great and you absolutely loved it. I mean, that's fine if you did. I'm not going to argue with you. It's all down to personal preference. Let me know how you thought about the year of 2024 in the comment section down below. Do you think something's going to happen at the Game Awards? Because I sure as hell don't, especially when it comes to Nintendo and their games. But hey, stranger things have happened, I guess. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button, like, comment, and share. Hit the bell as well. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.